According to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, international tourism could decline this year by 80%. Of course, St. Lucia is affected by this decline because of our dependence on tourism, and we are grappling with surviving COVID economically. Today on the hot seat with me, Crystal Riviere, I am joined by the Minister of Tourism, Honorable Dominic Fedee. Good day, Minister.
Thank you, Crystal. It's a pleasure being here.
Nice seeing you again. And Minister, I would like to know, first off, just off the bat, how are you dealing with the decline in tourism, the halt to our grind in this crisis?
Well, I think personally for me, it's been a mood of optimism. It's been a mood of courage, and it's been a mood of rising to an occasion when the country requires you to rise. I think that when you're in leadership positions, you've got to ensure that the best of you emerge in crisis situations. And for me, personally, that's how I have looked at it. There have been many times I have been tempted to panic because of what has happened and so on. At the day I can still recall when we had our first case. And I really worried tremendously about my constituents, about my family, about my friends and people I really care about. And the humane side of me did come out a lot. But I think now I am a lot more relaxed than I was on the day of learning that St. Lucia had its first case.
So we have, it appears at St. Lucia, we have really dealt with the curve, flattening the curve, or at least bringing it down significantly. Now we are grappling with reopening. And reopening for us means accepting tourists from around the world, accepting tourists from our traditional markets and maybe new markets right now. For you as Minister of Tourism, how do you envision this taking place?
Well, before I even get to the reopening bit, I think that I gotta say thanks to all of the frontliners, our police officers, our firefighters, our nurses, our doctors, the CMO and the Minister of Health. They have shown tremendous leadership in helping St. Lucia through this rather difficult time of our history. I want to thank all the members on the command center with me, which I chair, and for the remarkable efforts that you guys have displayed to ensure that St. Lucia today has one of the lowest COVID incidents in the world. I was very, very fortunate to have seen that the WHO in one of the weeks, I think it was 10 days ago, suggested that St. Lucia along with St. Bart's were the two countries that had 0 positive cases, and that is outstanding. I think today we have about 2 positive cases, so our cases have recovered well. We've got 0 deaths, and that's very critical. We see a very low signs of community transmission, which is also a very good thing. It's not a time to be complacent, but it's a time really for us to continue to put our foot in the gas, as they say, and to even escalate our assault on COVID to make sure that we keep all of our residents safe. And we go into the reopening of the commercial sector with a comprehensive approach, looking at manufacturing and the retail sector, looking at the agriculture sector, looking at tourism, looking at infrastructure and the construction industry, and how do we all coexist. You would have seen that economically this has devastated St. Lucia. The NIC has indicated there are about 18,000 individuals who have applied for unemployment benefits because of the adjustments we've made to the Act. So that gives you some kind of indication as to the severity of the unemployment situation and how that has affected people, everyday people like you and I. And what we've got to do now is to see how do we put this country back to work. We have to think of them, and we have to think of their safety as we approach this new season, if you will.
So how urgent is it for you as Minister of Tourism for us to reopen, say, the tourism industry?
Well, I think that the urgency is guided by 2 things. Our health capacity to deal with our tourist markets at this time, as you have rightly said in the opening statement, that our tourist markets are now epicenters of the virus, and that is of grave concern to us. And I would say that we are extremely hesitant in that regard. But what we do face is a reality, and the reality is that while we safeguard lives during coronavirus, we've also got to ensure that we safeguard livelihoods. So individuals have got to live, they've got to earn. We're not in a situation like advanced countries where our monetary policy can allow us to print the international currency of trade, the United States dollar in the case of the US. We are a small island developing state with very, very limited resources, and there's just so little capacity that we have to stimulate our private sector to get business going again, and also to get workers back at work.
You rightfully said we are a small island developing state, and it has been suggested for small island developing states for many years, from the time of Sir Arthur Lewis and even before that, that we consider diversifying our economy. And you are, of course, a very important minister sitting in the cabinet of ministers. What is the thinking right now? We're not saying to put tourism out, but what is the thinking in terms of support for the economy alongside tourism?
I get to that, but let's deal with the reopening of tourism before we get to diversification. What I want to tell you is that as it relates to reopening, we've got the most robust and stringent requirement by hotels to operate. And what we're doing is we're doing an experiment to start with a very small contingent of hotels. And that contingent will ensure that hotels have got to ensure that, let's start from the international airport. So today there's a meeting with IATA, which is the Air Transportation Association. In that meeting, what we're telling the airlines, you are not allowed to come to St. Lucia unless that every single passenger, every single flight attendant and crew member are wearing the PPE supplies. There'll be no seats allowed in the middle unless families are traveling together. We are also asking the airlines to have customers to have a rapid test. Now, the rapid test is not a golden standard test, but what it does is it's a level of filter that allows us to know whether someone has COVID or not. When they arrive at the Uranora International Airport, we will have equipment to scan the temperature for fever, which is an important symptom for COVID. And by testing them, what we'll be able to do is to see whether we need to isolate that individual or not before exposing them to the taxi driver, to the hotel workers, to the immigration officer, and all of the people along the value chain who need to serve them.
Will that come at a cost to us?
No, it will come at a cost to those hotels and airlines who want to operate at this time. We will bear the cost of the equipment needed at the international airport, because that asset is a state asset. But as long as it is not on the premises of the government, then the private sector, whether the airline, the international airport, or the hotel, will be responsible for meeting those costs. So what we're doing is enforcing the tourism license for the first time in the history of our country to make sure that hotels, when they're ready to reopen, that they meet the very strict guidelines for the tourism license, a COVID license, if you will. And we have had a lot of meetings with the hotel community, with the tourism attractions. Last night we had a very important meeting with the taxi sector, outlining to them the new set of protocols and guidelines that will guide their sector. And that's very critical.
Right, so we will move to diversification, like you said, but staying on topic where we're talking about what will be the new modus operandi for our hoteliers and our hotels. We have to weigh human resource, the importance of value of human resource, to what is our value economically. Do you realize, Minister, that it only takes about 3 waitresses, say one from Masha, another one from Wapatat, and another from Babano, who could then spread
We absolutely do, which is why we're taking our time. What we're discussing here is months of work, preparation. What you've got to do is to make sure you do all the planning ahead of time. While we don't know when we're opening, you've got to begin to plan to open. Because there are a lot of other factors. The world economy is beginning to open, airlines are beginning to fly, and if all the planes are going to disappear by the time you are ready to fly, always keep in mind as well that a lot of airline companies will not make COVID. They will not recover. Some will disappear and some will return. And so the capacity of our tourism-dependent economy to get airlift, to get airplanes, will be severely hampered. And so we've got to balance the whole need for us to safeguard our population, but also to ensure that we rebound the economy. But this will bring the very best out of us as an economy, as a country. It will ensure that it will demand a level of innovation that we have never seen before, whereby hotels are going to have the most strictest and the most nimble and innovative management system and set of standard operating procedures that they have never seen before. So in the same way that the terrorist attacks of 9/11 has changed the way we travel. Now you go through an airport and they scan your entire body. Americans need a passport to come to the Caribbean, whilst before 9/11 they didn't. In the very same way, this has already changed the way people travel. So I think that every step of the way, what we are ensuring, from the international airport to the flight to the hotel, that hotels are going to have quarantine facilities. Their medical stations are going to be beefed up. They're going to have at least 2 qualified professionals on property that will be required to ensure that if a guest is showing any symptoms, they're pulled out of circulation, isolated in a quarantine compartment of the hotel for testing and for monitoring by our health professionals. So I think what we have got are a large-scale set of ideas that I believe can take us through this. The risk is high, but we shouldn't be afraid of risk. What we have to do is preempt the risk, and what we've got to do is manage the risk, because I think the consequences are dire. The economic consequences are dire. We can see the obliteration of an entire economy, an entire livelihoods of several families.
So tourism is tourism is our main industry, and the success of tourism really impacts the entire country. So far, what you have described is really how the tourists will be in the hotel and how the hotels will operate. But how will that trickle down now to the rest of the economy, to the smaller man who is waiting for tourists to be walking down the beach so that he can sell his wares and so on? How will tourism continue to support our economy?
Unfortunately, I mean, in that vending sector, it's a smaller number of people. But when you look at the direct workers, we're talking about 14,000 that are now on the breadline. I've just described that there are 18,000 that has just applied. Most of them are coming from the formal economy. And those that have come from the formal economy, we know it's 18,000. I don't think we have as many vendors. But as well, what we're doing is making sure that we get this first step right. We've got to begin somewhere. We're not going to be doing community tourism as you know it. So tourists to the Castries Market, tourists to Rosalie Friday night. We're not doing any of that kind of large-scale crowd events where you would have heightened the possibility of having some kind of community spread. What we want to do in the first instance is limit the interaction between tourists and members of our public, so that we would have reduced the risk of a tourist bringing the virus to St. Lucia and spreading it to the rest of our community.
So our source markets now, where we traditionally interact with, engage, and try to get tourists from the UK, from the US, from Europe, Right now, our source markets are severely affected. What is the new game plan for the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, for the Ministry of Tourism?
Well, it takes a very long time to build a market. It takes about 3 years. And in the short run, what we have to do is to manage the situation of our source markets. As you have described, and I totally agree, their COVID situation is of much concern to them as well. But we continue to see some semblance of improvements in some of the states, where we see that the curve is beginning to flatten and even decline in some instances. So that is a good sign. And if they can continue in that trajectory, then I believe that we would be in a good position here in St. Lucia to be able to manage the inflow of tourists from those areas. So we're doing everything possible by testing them before they come to see how best we can catch a positive case before it comes to the country.
We have seen cruise tourism on the rise in the last couple years in St. Lucia. Do you believe that cruise tourism will continue to be a major plank for us, or are we also revisiting that?
I think it will continue to be a major plank. The Caribbean continues to negotiate with the cruise industry for a better position and for a better deal, if you will, in terms of the commercial and business arrangements. We as well, we need to do certain things to improve our destination, our product, and the offerings that we offer to cruise passengers, so that those offerings will yield more revenues and more economic opportunity for our people. Simple things like, what we sell in the market, for example, and how does that redound to more sales if we can just improve the craft and other offerings, souvenir offerings. So there are a lot that we need to do, excite the touring and excursion sector a little bit more. But I think that there is a significant opportunity there. As to whether it's an easy task to recover the cruise industry from COVID, it's a whole different ball game. And we are starting with the hotel community, because then you have a bit more control in terms of enclaving the guest, if you will, and to compartmentalize them into certain sections in St. Lucia, and that will be driven by the policy, and as well as working with hotels to see how we can have only organized tours that are of low risk. With cruise ship passengers, it's a little more difficult to do that. So we're not entering into that aspect of it soon. The yachting sector as well. We are going to take our time before we go full blast into it. But this first step allows us to test, to see whether we can coexist with COVID, whether we can manage tourism within a COVID environment. And if we can't, we simply shut the borders down completely. We're not opening all markets. Just one or two is what the discussion is based on. But I don't have a specific date to give you. We will announce that on Friday.
You're watching The Hot Seat. When we come back, we will talk about enclave tourism and what does it mean for us in St. Lucia if we completely shut the borders. Thank you for staying with us. Minister, when we left, we were talking about the new operating protocols for the hotels and for hoteliers. How will those operating protocols affect us St. Lucians, the workers at those hotels?
Well, I think that everything we've done is with the worker in mind. The level of occupational health and safety measures are being elevated. So hotels are required to ensure, in the same way that a hospital would have the PPE supplies for their employees, the Environmental Health Department has outlined very clearly that hotel employees will need to wear the necessary protective gear. So the staff at the front desk will be wearing their mask. All of the employees on resort will be wearing their mask. We will ensure that the social distancing is actually applied. the number of people they serve in restaurants will be reduced significantly. There'll be no buffet meals, for example, for employees. When they're leaving the property, they would need to take a shower so that they don't bring any trace of the virus back to the community. The hotel will be responsible for laundering their uniforms so that they can have a change the following day. So these are a lot of the guidelines we've put in place to protect our staff. When the guest arrives, there'll be a welcome letter from most of the general managers indicating that as the world goes through this global pandemic and we are fighting this pandemic, that what is going to be absolutely necessary is for the world is for the guests really to participate by wearing a mask and to ensure that they are part of the whole process of really curtailing any potential of spread from COVID-19. So I want to make that absolutely clear. That is a very important question, that everything we do is with the worker and with the community in mind. And hotels have accepted they're not going to be making money, but what they're doing is participating in a first phase of trying to help us and to work with us to see whether we are ready or we're able to do it.
And just to touch once more on cruise, in terms of the investors and the investment in cruise tourism, how viable do you see the industry now, and how viable do you see it in the near future?
It will take some time for the cruise industry to come back and for customers' confidence to get back into it. I mean, unfortunately, there was a lot of bad publicity on the cruise ship sector. We see that where a lot of the viruses were contracted were in cruise ships, and the coverage was quite severe. So that's going to take a while, and I think that has messed with the psyche of customers as it relates to it. So as to whether this will affect demand, this is my initial reaction, but I'm not really sure how the market will behave. I think that the market has behaved in ways that we have not seen. This has been so fluid that even the best of researchers and scientists are still trying to figure out how this is going to work, and economists are still trying to figure out what the real economic implications are going to be on the implications in the various sectors, and it's changing rapidly. The IMF has had to revise its initial projections on what it thought the implications on the economic devastation of COVID will be on the world economy. And I think in the same way, I would prefer to wait to see what will happen. But my initial reaction is that the cruise industry would have quite a lot of work to do. But this is not just a problem for the cruise industry. I think this is a problem for cruise destinations as well. So we have got to be willing participants in that fight, in helping the customer to return to a place where they are ready to travel. Because if the cruise lines are not in business, then we are not in business. And I think that that's a problem that is a Caribbean problem. We certainly want people to come into our hotels and to hop on cruise ships and come to the Caribbean.
What have you done and your team done to improve the product, and what is our product today?
Well, I think certainly what we've done is a lot of work on focusing on the socio-cultural aspect of the product. So we have definitely, like if you notice, our country and our government's policy has been to focus less on jazz, which is not our culture. We spent a lot of money into it. I think the last budget in 2016 was $14 million. But yet we didn't put our own artists on a proper stage. We didn't give them proper lights. We didn't give them proper sound. And we didn't give the support. And I'm proud that we have put the most that any government has ever done into Carnival, $4.7 million. That's just the beginning. There are other things that needs to happen in terms of ensuring that, the costume design and, working with musicians to improve their music and take it to the next level. I don't think any government can take credit for the phenomenal job that the Dennery segment revolution has brought. It certainly has brought about a lot, and we are proud of them. Let's look at the whole village tourism project to ensure that we safeguard the architectural significance of St. Lucia by saying that here are our villages, let's not overlook them, let's preserve them, let's build them up, let's put some infrastructure, let's encourage villagers to participate in the mainstay of the economy. Now, I believe when you talk about diversification, the question should be, how do we yield more? How should there be a better return from tourism?
Airbnb, as you know, is known internationally as the biggest hotel because it has the most hotel rooms around the world. Airbnb people who are right now on Airbnb as enlisted, those who own properties and they are listed on Airbnb, they felt a bit threatened a few months ago because of certain announcements that were made about them having to pay taxes.
Well, we've got to all participate. They have been collecting taxes for several destinations. I think the city of Paris, they certainly have a relationship with Cayman to receive data and collect fees, and I think Jamaica as well in the Caribbean. It's normal. Are you talking about Airbnb operators in St. Lucia, or are they overall?
I'm not talking about around the world, but I'm speaking specifically to St. Lucia and the idea that these small business people,
it's being passed on to the customer, and it's very few. I think for Airbnb, what we're proposing is an average of $2 US a night. So it's very, very small. The average accommodation gets about $60 in St. Lucia US nightly. If we took an average, there are going to be highs and lows, but I think that we've all got to participate because you've got to market, you've got to regulate, you've got to ensure safety and standards to give the industry sustainability. If you don't manage it, then what you're going to have is a free-for-all, and free-for-alls never work. You've got to make sure that the security, safety of the reputation is safeguarded. But what this does, it helps every single Airbnb host, if you will. And we're doing this in the very best interest of St. Lucians.
We now hear talk of the Tourism Council. How will that be different from other regional organizations that have had similar goals? And what's in it for us?
Well, I think this is revolutionary. The only other country in the Caribbean that has one would be St. Kitts. So what we've had before, we've had tourism advisory councils, but that's a little different from what we're imagining. What we're imagining is a council that is legislated, that has the ability to take a comprehensive view of tourism, because tourism affects so many different sectors. So if we look at the point surfing sector, Invest St. Lucia runs the duty-free shop. The ports is run by SLASPA. The market is run by the city council. The road for the guests to get to the market is managed by infrastructure. And then the food that would be sold, if you're doing local stuff, is done by agriculture. And then there's the Ministry of Tourism in the middle of all that. So what we have noticed is that there are so many agencies of government that are responsible for tourism, but yet there is not that focus. And what we want to do is, you've got to make sure that you take care of the foundation of your economy. And this is to improve the management of the sector, basically. So we meet on a quarterly basis. And what we have tried to do is to make sure that the National Trust and all of these organizations are all involved and they're all participating in the tourism sector.
Our broader interest at the end of the day is the development of St. Lucia, and I'm sure that you go to sleep with that on your mind. In your opinion, when it comes to national development, what else can be done for our overall national development?
What else can be done? That's a very good question. A lot more. I think development is a process. It's not an overnight solution to the many problems that small countries face. And it has, unfortunately, it's happening within the context of a global situation that is extremely cruel to small countries, whether this administration or another administration is in power. But what I can tell you is that I enjoy the fact that I see the economy is inching upwards. We have an average growth of about 2% in the last 4 years. That is pretty solid. If we compare that to the last 4 years, we have an average of at least 2 years of negative growth and at least another 2 years of below 1% in growth. So what we have recognized is that our economy is growing a lot faster in the last 4 years. Unemployment is the big economic indicator to me that tells you whether, as a government, you're serving people or whether your economy is serving people. And that has come down from, in 2015, it was 24.5%. Now it's 16.8%. So it has come down by about 8 points. It means, therefore, that we have brought it down almost 35%. So it means, therefore, that you've got a third less of the people who were looking for jobs back 6 years ago that are not looking for those jobs anymore because the economy has performed a lot better. So there's a good correlation between the unemployment and the GDP growth as well. I believe that you raise a good point about diversification. I would like to see revenues go up. I would like to see St. Lucians earn more, which is why in my sector, we are trying to reimagine it a lot more. So yes, you want to have linkages, but we want to make sure as well that there are direct benefits and there are direct yields. So we've got to then look at how we can create that nexus between tourism and technology. How do we bring about more benefits to the people of St. Lucia is what the next 5 years have got to be all about. And it's got to be, how do we invest in tourism to get a better return on investment for our people?
A short 4 years ago, many were touting that you don't give a man a fish, you give him the opportunity to learn to fish and so that he could fish for himself in terms of employment. In your constituency, ancillary and canneries, have you been able to bring down the unemployment rate?
Absolutely. Royalton reopening was a blessing because it was just about the time I was coming in as an MP, and we did a big job fair. It was hugely successful. We had over 100 jobs that we created for young people, particularly from the ancillary region, but they came from other places like Jacmel and Munda, some from Millet, but most of them in the ancillary catchment, the village area. And we've got jobs we've gotten for people at Marigo Hotel, at Sandals. Being Minister of Tourism, that's one of the benefits. And I believe that that is a sustainable way to deal with a lot of the issues we have island-wide. It is to make sure that people have access to work, people can earn a living to take care of their families. If you're not doing that, then I believe that that is going to create a lot more pressures, and it will complicate the situation. When we look in the area of agriculture in the Roseau Valley, advocating for the farmers to have the best conditions, so like the feeder road program, which is going to be done later in the year by the Ministry of Agriculture. We've also got the agricultural support program in fertilizers and the silting of main drains, which happened a year ago. So we've been working very, very hard to make sure that our farmers are well supported. I don't remember the last count, but I think there are over 200 farmers in the constituency, most of them banana farmers.
Minister, the clamor is on. When are we going to reopen the economy for us here in St. Lucia? Why hasn't the economy opened as yet? Why can't we go to Beauty Max? Why can't we go to the mall for us to shop or for us to just buy other things other than what is presently available? When do you think that will happen?
So I think we make an announcement on Friday. We have a big national stakeholders meeting where we have received from the command center a comprehensive presentation on for cabinet's consideration on a phase opening of the economy. But we've been doing this already. If you look, the supermarkets have remained open, the gas stations, albeit they're essential services. We've gone ahead. The next step was the home stores. Then we did adjust the liquor licenses. The manufacturing sector were happening. Call centers were operating from home, and they had some minimal operations within their facilities. So there has been that phased opening of the economy. Now, in the global pandemic such as the one that we're in, I think at the foremost of our minds as a cabinet is to make sure that the well-being, the health and safety of the people of St. Lucia was our first priority. I think now that we have had some practice in managing this virus, which we didn't have the experience in managing before, we feel a lot more comfortable to go forward and potentially widen the scope of services that we can now offer. But it is not a time to be complacent. It is a time that we must continue to safeguard ourselves, protect the people that we love, to stay at home, to only go out when we need to, and to avoid large crowd gatherings. So we're trying our best. We have seen the testing and social distancing and all the other mechanisms have worked in terms of fighting this virus. But what we want to ensure, absolutely, is that we protect our country. There are a lot of elderly folks among us who are diabetic, who have asthma issues, kidney failures, and chronic illnesses that are going to find it very difficult to recover if they do contract COVID. And so we've got to make sure that we isolate those individuals, protect them, so that we can have a country of zero deaths if we can. But St. Lucia has been extremely blessed that we've got a lot of hardworking health professionals, people on the front line, police officers, customs officers, firefighters, and immigration officers too, and everyone who have really been supportive to this initiative. We really want to say a special thank you to them. And thanks to you, friends in the media, for your participation and partnership over the last few months.
And finally, Mr. Minister, it would be remiss of me if I did not ask what hotel projects are actually going to take place. We heard of a few sod turn-ins, we heard of a few hotel projects. Which are the ones you know are actually going to happen?
Well, I think that they are all going to happen, but it takes time. When you're planning developments, and which is why we have been advocating for there to be a greater ease of doing business environment, and we are taking steps to statutarize a lot of the agencies that are responsible for quickening the pace and implementing the projects. The current structure just simply doesn't work. So I think that the investment in Chazelle in the Minister of Investments constituency is going to happen. The Canals project, we broke ground on that. That is going to happen. They're selling CIP files, as I know, and the investor is actually committed to putting large sums of their own money into the project. In the initial instance, they've got machinery. I think had it not been for COVID, we would have seen that project advance more significantly. The court case between Landings and Sandoz, well, not between Landings and Sandoz, but between the DCA and Landings, was a bit of a setback on the Sandoz project, where we would have seen some 400 rooms and $200 million being invested. So we've seen a combination of issues that have arisen, and they've really been a stumbling block in the way of these various developments, but they will happen. The investors are very much committed to them. The people at Cabot are moving full steam ahead. They have said that they need 2 years to complete the golf course project, and then they will build a hotel following that.
Thank you for joining us this week on The Hot Seat. Next week, we will continue our discussions on surviving COVID, political development, national policies, and where do we go from here. Thank you and good night.